All right, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Keandra Woods to frame up our session today.
Good afternoon, and again, welcome. We're so glad that you have joined us today for this particular session. So as we're moving throughout the session today, we really want you to frame and look through the lens of equity. So looking at how can we put and keep equity in the forefront of our minds, front and center, and our perspectives, our institutional cultures, and practices during the immediate term crisis, as well as looking forward to some of the longer term crisis that's going to be an effect of us being a part of the COVID situation that we're in right now. If you look at the objectives for today, our participants will cohere around the current reality of virtual learning and the impact on pre-K-12 students, families, teacher candidates, site coordinators, and field supervisors. As we go out through the session today, you will also be reminded of ways in which we can put educational equity in the front and center of our work and coaching teacher candidates. And finally, participants will also begin to generate essential considerations and questions for coaching through the pre-conference in virtual spaces and for virtual spaces. Moving into the agenda for today's session, I'll give you just a few moments to look at the agenda and just see the plans that we have laid out for you today. You will notice that we will spend some time in some small group planning with the grade level spans that you have selected at the beginning of the session. Now we're going to move to Ms. Nicole Lavini, and she's going to look at us to have us just frame some considerations of the current reality.
Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome, and we're so happy to have you. Today, as you know, our focus is on formal evaluations. For some of us, some of the language we use is POP cycles. And so we're really talking about that today, formal evaluations in the context of virtual learning. And so we know, and you can see in the visuals before you, learning and teaching are happening in a variety of settings right now across our country. Children and families are working hard to access learning so that they can engage and continue on in their own progress. You have a few visuals in front of you where you have two students, you may have seen this on the local news station in your area, who didn't have access to Wi-Fi, and so they were at a Taco Bell, leveraging Wi-Fi in their community so that they could access their classroom and engage with their teacher and their peers. And then you have children across the country who are still at home that may not have entered the school, a brick and mortar, but they're at home maybe working around the kitchen table or a desk or wherever it is where they have a space where they can engage in their work. And then there are some children in some spaces where you all are that might actually be in classroom settings, but that looks a little different too. There's spacing and you can see even the little borders on the floor there where the kids are to remain so that they have that social distancing and they have their masks on. And then we even have students who, again, access is always a challenge, and in certain communities it can be even a real barrier, but for Wi-Fi purposes, we have families and children who are even learning out of their vehicles because they have to go and find Wi-Fi spots that maybe the school district puts out, or their local libraries or community centers that have it available. So just as a reminder, we're talking today about formal evaluations, but really thinking about it in the context of how teaching and learning are really happening in such a variety of ways right now across our country. And then on the next slide, you heard Keandra talk about, we're going to really keep equity at the center of our conversation today. It's always relevant, and we just think right now there's such an opportunity as coaches who are out in the field supporting candidates during the formal evaluation process to really apply that equity lens. There's such an opportunity because teaching and learning are happening in such different ways to really emphasize the equity lens in our coaching approach. And so what you're seeing before you is just a really simple equation. And as we go through the different learning segments today and the different dialogue and discussions that we'll have together, we're really gonna frame it up in this equation, meaning the who, the what, and the how, to equate to equity. And so who's going to engage in this work? What might we do? What information do we have that can help us in this coaching work during formal evaluations? And then how might we do it? What might it actually look and sound like out in the field? And so we'll really organize the content today in this particular equation.
So we were able to get some really raw footage of virtual interactions happening currently right now in the current setting that we're in. So we're going to watch a short video clip so that you can just take a viewpoint of really being able to see what it's like to teach in a virtual space. So as you are watching this recording, I want you to take some low inference data notes. You will also have a document that's going to be in the chat for you to be able to capture some of your thoughts and just answer some of the questions and considerations as you are watching this video. Again, the video clip is about 5 minutes, and then we will have some time for you to be able to finish your the form, and then also just reflect on what you just viewed in the video.
Okay, boys and girls, do you remember when we were talking about good citizens? Thumbs up if you remember about citizens. Thank you, Kyson. Thank you, Isabella. Okay, so we're going to be talking about citizens, and I want you to give me a thumbs up if you think it's a good thing, and thumbs down. Oh, I didn't even start recording. Okay.
I did. No.
Thumbs up if you think that it's a good thing, and then thumbs down if it's not. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Help throw away the trash near our school. Do you think that's a good citizen, or do you think that's a bad citizen? Do you think it's a good citizen or a bad citizen? Thumbs up if you think it's good. Thumbs down if you think it's bad. Okay, Thomas, I think it's good. Isabella, Abel. Okay, thank you. What about helping your community keep the beaches clean? We want to keep all the beaches clean so none of our turtles get things on there. Do you think that's a good thing that we help keep the community clean? Or do you think it's a bad thing that we help the community clean? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Thomas, I think it's a good thing. Abel. Okay, Isabella, thank you. Isabella, can you unmute yourself and you tell me why you think it's a good thing? Uh-oh. I think Isabella went to go. Oh, okay, there we go. Isabella, can you tell us why it's a good thing? Can't hear you, Isabella.
Come on now.
Okay. Hello. Why do you think it's a good thing that we keep the beaches clean, Isabella? Would you like help from one of your classmates? Okay, would any of our classmates like to help Isabella to see why we keep the beaches clean? Okay, yes, Thomason, can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
If you keep the water clean, that is how you get a good citizen.
Thank you, Thomason. Did everyone hear Thomason? If you keep the beaches clean, that's how you become a great citizen, by picking up and keeping our environment clean. Okay. Is it a good citizen if we take one of our classmates' snacks? If it doesn't belong to you and you take their snacks, do you think that's a good thing, a good citizen, or a bad citizen? Thumbs up or thumbs down, what do you think it is? Maya, you think it's a bad citizen? Can you tell us why? Do you need help, Maya? Okay, there you go.
It's a bad choice to take your classmates' snacks because they might say, hey, those are my snacks.
Right, and it's not good to take other snacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Maya.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Got it?
Oh, look at the P word, polite. Everyone say polite, polite. Is it a good citizen if we be polite and help others? Like say if our classmates need help or we have an extra pencil, do you think that's a good citizen? Or you think that's a bad citizen if we help and be polite to others? Maya said yes. Thomason said yes. Ryan, what do you think? Do you think it's a good citizen or a bad citizen, Ryan?
Bad.
You think it's a bad citizen to help others?
Yeah.
No, we think that it's a good thing. Kyson, do you think it's a good thing to be polite and helpful?
Yes.
Why do you think that? Can you help our classmate out?
Uh-huh.
Why do you think that, Kyson?
Because they help me how to find stuff.
It helps others be nice and polite.
Uh-huh.
Okay. For the next one, if we don't follow the rules, is that a good citizen or a bad citizen? Okay, Abel, can you explain why it's not a good citizen to don't follow the rules? Why should we follow the rules, Abel? Abel's going to get a little help.
All right, thank you so much, Keandra, for sharing that video. We're going to just take a moment. We want you to reflect on what you saw. And right now in the chat, you will see a short Google form linked in the chat. And if you would click on that link, and we're going to give you several minutes just to reflect on some of the evidences that you saw from that video. Thank you, Linda, for chatting that link. So it should be now in your chat. We'll give you about 3 or 4 minutes to just quietly reflect on that video and gather some evidence from what you saw.
You have about 1 more minute to finish up your thoughts. So next we're getting ready to move into some breakout sessions, and we really want you to be able to reflect and just talk through the video that you were just able to witness. This is the current reality for many of our classrooms. And again, it was a very unedited version. So as you notice that many of the faces were blurred out for the students, but you were still able to really capture the culture that's happening in a lot of the virtual spaces. And we really would like you to frame the thinking of, if you could go back and have a pre-conference with this teacher, what would be some of the coaching points that you would arise with the teacher and talk through to be able to leverage the pre-conference to really set her up for success for this observation? So in just a moment, you will get the message to move into your breakout sessions, and you will have some time to reflect on that question as well as some of the other questions that were in the form, in the virtual form.
Welcome back, everyone. You will get some more opportunities to collaborate with the folks that were in your particular group. Hopefully you had some good discussions. I was with the early childhood group, and we had a really great discussion about that particular video, but coaching in general. And so as we continue on today, again, remembering we are really layering the equity equation, the who, the what, and the how, on top of the POP cycle, and in particular today, focusing on pre-conferencing is really where we're going to dig in. And actually, in my early childhood group, we were just starting to talk about this, but the who, there's a lot of folks involved when you really step back and think about what's happening in schools right now and with formal evaluations. When we step back and we think about our coaching and really what are we grounding our coaching in? Well, we're grounding it in outcomes for kids. And so we've got our our PK through 12 students. Then we have our mentor teachers or our cooperating teachers who are also out in the field. And with my group in particular, we discussed how mentor teachers are in such a space where they're innovating as well, but also I think many of them really see the candidates as an asset in the classroom in this case, because candidates may have some real experiences with technology. And so they bring such a great wealth of opportunity to innovate in the classroom, the virtual classroom. So we have our mentor teachers, we have the candidates themselves that we're coaching and supporting. And then of course the role of the site coordinator, and then any university or field supervisors who are supporting that formal evaluation process. And so we're really just in the context of the pandemic. We know that these key stakeholders are engaging in the work of teaching and learning in a variety of ways. And so that in that pre-conferencing for formal evaluations, we really can remember and step back to think about that equity equation and how that can help us coach for equity at this time, especially. And then on the next slide, you're gonna see some visuals, and I'm gonna talk here for a minute and label some of them, and then we're going to engage in just a quick activity in the chat. But you're seeing 4 specific visuals in front of you, and there may even be some that are not visible that you're experiencing yourself. In the visual number 1 there up in the upper left-hand corner, you can see where you have students who are face-to-face or in the classroom setting. The site coordinator or the supervisor is the one that's coming in virtual to make that formal observation. And then you have the mentor teacher and the teacher candidate who are face-to-face with the children live in the classroom. So that yellow character is really important to notice as we kind of go through and look at these 4 visuals. So you have everyone else is face-to-face in the first one, except for you as a site coordinator or a supervisor, you would be coming in virtually. And then scenario number 2, everyone's online. I know there are a lot of schools that are still in this situation. Some have started to stagger in and start in person, but others not so much. They're still fully online. So this has everyone. You can see that yellow character, again, the candidate themselves teaching virtually, the kids are connected virtually, mentor teachers connected virtually, as well as the site coordinator or the supervisor. And then in the third visual, you can see the candidate, so that yellow character is actually coming in virtually. So would be teaching a lesson for their formal observation online, but the children and the mentor teachers are in the classroom space. So they're all face-to-face, but the candidate is not. And then in the fourth visual, you can see, again, focus on that yellow character for just a moment. They're online. There are some students, maybe half the class or so, online as well. And then you might have some students face-to-face with a live mentor teacher face-to-face in the classroom. And so these are representative of 4 relatively common scenarios that we have discovered so far, although there may be more. So these aren't, of course, exhaustive, but these are pretty representative of what we've heard of going on across the country at this point. And so as you look at those visuals and you think about the context in which your candidates that you supervise are in in the chat, if you could, use the visuals to help you. If your candidates for this upcoming evaluation cycle are in scenario number 1, you're going to put a 1 in the chat. If they're a 2, put a 2. If they're a 3, put a 3. If they're a 4, put a 4. And if you're just actually, maybe you're not sure, or it's more than 1, you could put a 5. So if you're just not sure at this point, you could put a 5. So I want to give a minute so we can take a look, see where how everyone's experiencing things.
Yeah, it looks like there are quite a few 5s, which is great. I mean, we know we're in a time of uncertainty, and then there are several of you who have all 4 of these situations. So I think I saw every number Nicole represented.
Yeah, I'm looking now. Yeah, this is really helpful, I think, as we dig in today, we think about those formal observations, and then, you know, that added piece of what is the context, keeping this in mind when we think about the coaching, the questions, and the considerations that we can generate as a coalition to support coaching for candidates that find themselves, and mentor teachers and kids that find themselves in any of these particular contexts. Because the technology matters, how kids are experiencing and receiving that learning, and how teachers are teaching. So that's wonderful.
Great. And, you know, I know when we've watched that video before, I remember participants, you know, and I had the same reaction that, man, this is hard. This is hard. And there's so much grace as we are all learning, as our teacher candidates are learning, as our teachers, our mentors are learning. And then there's a couple of things that we want to be really focused on as we're thinking about working with our teacher candidates as they teach. One of the things that in June, during our June symposium, we had TNTP come out and do a short little conference session around their study that they conducted called the Opportunity Myth. We also had TNTP do a keynote at our curriculum meeting. So many of you have maybe listened or read the study on Opportunity Myth. We will make that available to you all if you haven't. But one of the things that came out of this study is they observed several school districts and many classrooms. And in their observations, what they found is that 57% of classrooms are where teachers created their own materials when they taught. And so what that means is that only 43% actually used the school curriculums. But when they drilled down to that 57% of teachers who created their own materials, what they found is that only 20% of the assignments were on grade level. So that's something to kind of pay attention to. So many of those classrooms, over 30%, almost 40% were below grade level. So just something to pay attention to, especially as we're coaching teacher candidates. Another finding that came out of the study was this idea that if you look on the left, it says 56% and then 65%. When they looked at students and the outcomes of grade level assignments, 56% of our students of color scored very successful on those grade level assessments, whereas 65% of white children scored successfully on those assignments. And so, you know, what that shows us is that when students have access to grade level assignments, they can be very successful on those assignments. On the right, what we see though is that only 38% of children of color had access to grade level assignments. 12% of white children did not have access to grade level assignments. So this tells us that more white children are in classrooms that are providing them grade level assignments. And so we would say this is an equity issue, that where we see teachers lowering their expectations is when, you know, is in classrooms that have more students of color. And we know that children, white and children of color, can perform successfully on assignments. So why are the expectations being lowered in these classrooms? So some of the things as we think about, you know, I think there's been several articles, many of you have probably been exposed to them, showing that, you know, especially in time of a pandemic, we could see the opportunity gap, especially for our children of color living in poverty, grow. And so, and you know, we know that right now there's a time of uncertainty. It could be some children are going back to school full time, some are hybrid. It might not even be till fall of 2021 where we're back in school full time like normal. And so this is a huge equity issue. We know that. And what TNTP, they kind of charge us with several big things. They charge us with like, how do we ensure that our teacher candidates and teachers are providing consistent opportunities for students to do grade level assignments, to do grade level work, not lowering our expectations, ensuring that we're still providing really strong instruction where students are in charge of doing the majority of the thinking. We're still really engaging students in the learning, and we're holding students to high expectations. So as we saw on that slide before, that, you know, those, you know, in different classrooms, our expectations are lower, but we want to make sure that we're holding high expectations for all of our children. So just as we share this and we think through this, we would say that this is an equity issue, but you may not agree, and that's okay. And we want to hear from you. And so we're just going to ask just to take a moment to chat. Do you agree that holding students to those grade level expectations and holding that level of rigor for all of our students is an equity issue? If you agree, tell us why. If you disagree, please tell us why. And every opinion is welcome. We'll give you just a moment to do that. Yeah, thank you so much for leveraging the chat and just sharing your opinion. And we have so much to learn from each other. So again, it's okay to disagree and to share your standpoint. It's okay to agree. Thank you for that. I know in my group, when we were discussing the pre-conference, we talked about like how we would coach in the area of content quite a bit for the teacher candidate who we observed to create more of a rigorous citizenship lesson. So that was a lot of where ours focused on. Yeah, thank you, Adrian, for that feedback. Okay, great. And thank you, Mary, for sharing that too. All right, so as we think about this idea of equity, we want to just keep it at the forefront of, we have so much opportunity in the cycle of formal evaluations to prepare our candidates to address equity in their lessons. And I'm going to hand it over to Laura LaCroix to talk about how do we do that.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think as I read the comments in the chat, I'm really struck by the many of you who have said, yes, and we need to provide the supports for them to get there. So that leads directly into the how. How might this look as we're supporting teacher candidates know what to do to really engage students in grade level content? So on the next slide, you'll see how we're talking today about approaching our how. So in the USPREP lingo, we have what we call the POP cycle, but essentially the POP cycle is a formal performance assessment that stands for pre-conference, observation, and post-conference. And so when we engage in the POP cycle, it really is a special opportunity. We can leverage these formal performance assessments to really look at what a teacher candidate needs in order to be successful. Kendra, do you mind going back to the roadmap? Thank you. We're gonna stay here for just a little bit longer. So when we look at the first step in the POP cycle, we look at the pre-conference. And in the pre-conference, we're coaching teacher candidates to ensure that their lessons as planned are the best possible lessons for students. We work with the teacher candidates to ensure cognitive engagement, that we have intentional planning to ensure that all students can access the grade level curriculum. Much like many of you said in the comments, it's about strategically planning. How are we going to provide those supports? And when we're really leading a strong pre-conference, we're helping teacher candidates see the many ways in which they can strengthen their lesson. And most importantly, we give them an opportunity to do so. We expect that their lesson isn't going to be perfect in this pre-conference. Even veteran teachers, I'll speak for myself, don't always have a perfect lesson, right? So once we coach them up, we really want to give them an opportunity to adjust the lesson. This is one more way that we can work to ensure educational equity by really providing the highest possible quality lesson plan before the teacher goes in front of students. And then in the observation stage, of course, we're observing the teacher candidate enact the lesson plan that we coached in the pre-conference. In the virtual space, this might look like going into their Zoom meetings or their Google Meets, or if we don't have access, it might look like them recording the lesson and giving us a copy. Regardless of how we're observing, we do ask that everyone records so that the teacher candidate can go back and self-reflect, as well as you as a site coordinator or field supervisor. And as we reflect, both the teacher candidate and the supervisors are looking for areas of reinforcement, something that is strong and we want them to continue to strengthen, and an area of refinement. So this would be an area that we want the teacher candidate to focus on for growth and improvement. And in the post-conference then, the conversation really focuses on balancing the teacher candidate self-reflection with the intentional and high leverage coaching moves that you're bringing to the table to, again, coach up from wherever that teacher candidate is. And we're looking to affect students both in their classroom that they're seeing already day to day in their field experience, and then also, of course, their professional decisions that they make moving forward. So on the next slide, this might look familiar to you for those who work with USPREP regularly. These are the stages of learning. And what this reminds us of is that we're moving continually up and down these stages of learning based on what we're engaging in. Whether you've been teaching in virtual settings before or not, this shared experience of everyone or a good majority of people being virtual is a new shared experience. So if you were at a stage 4 in unconscious competence when it comes to teaching, you may feel, depending on your technological literacy, you may feel like you're at a stage 1, like I don't even know what I don't know going into this. Or perhaps you might be in a stage 2 realizing, oh, the things I thought would be helpful actually are not so helpful. What might we do in this situation? So we share this just to say, as coaches, we can always leverage the stages of learning to help teacher candidates unpack their thinking, and for us to make our thinking visible, to really expressly name these high leverage practices that we engage teacher candidates in. Now I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, who's going to take us a little bit deeper into how to think about the pre-conference.
So as we've been talking about today, thank you, Laura, for framing up the POP cycle. We know today's purpose is just to dig in and focus in on the pre-conference itself. The pre-conference promotes just healthy discourse between candidate and coach, mentor teacher too, for those of you that are able to incorporate your mentor teachers into that discussion to promote positive outcomes for kids. And so we are just, again, just as a reminder, we're layering the equity equation, the who, the what, and the how. And in particular, the how is the coaching that we do, where we can take those deep dives with candidates during these really special and unique moments that we have with them during their student teaching experience. Depending on your program, everyone has a varying number of formal evaluations that are done. Give or take, the number might be around 4-ish, for their experience. Some of you have a few more, some of you maybe 1 or 2 less. But in general, when those deep dives are taken, we know, especially in this current context, we really can coach up and support candidates in helping them think through some real important considerations to ensure equity for kids, considering the context. And so on the next slide, we're going to engage in a small group activity. So we'll get back with our groups where we were before. If you joined us a little bit later, then you'll have some new faces to meet. But we'll get back into our core groups where we were previously, and we're going to spend some time on an interactive document in those small groups, identifying those considerations aligned to those 4 keys that TNTP really outlines for us to keep at the forefront, which has to do with those grade appropriate assignments, strong instruction that really promotes and supports students in doing most of the thinking during the lesson, deep engagement, which we know with technology, there are a lot of opportunities to really think that through and support candidates with. And then also the high expectations that students can achieve at the grade level standard. And so at any rate, each group, we will work on these individual documents together for the next several minutes. Laura will tell us in a minute how much time we have. And then once that's all done, just so we're clear on what will happen after the webinar, you all are digging in deep on a certain grade level band. So for example, I'm with early childhood. We're gonna dig in deep for pre-K to 2nd grade. Those of you in elementary are 3 through 6th. Those of you that are in middle and high, you're 7, 12. We will take all of the considerations that you identify in the coaching questions and put them into one document so that at the end of the webinar, we will send out the video like we always do, but we're also going to send out a resource that will span pre-K through 12th grade with all of the coaching questions and the considerations that you all develop together. So we will have one main collaborative document by the end of our time today. So without further ado, can you walk us through, Laura, how much time do we have in our groups? And is there anything else that anyone needs to know before we all move to our groups?
So we'll have a solid 15 or 20 minutes in groups to really dig into this. And so much like before, you'll have a USPREP member there who will share the document, share their screen, and help facilitate the conversation. So I'll put us in the groups now, unless there's anything else, Nicole, for the good of the cause.
No, I think we're ready.
All right, you should see the pop-up on your screen now. Enjoy your conversations, everyone.
And generated some great coaching questions, thinking about your grade level and the students and the teacher candidates who you serve and work with. As we start to conclude our time together, you recognize that we spent a lot of time on thinking about the lens of equity, but how high leverage our pre-conferences are with teacher candidates and how we have an opportunity to intervene. And we focused on 4 keys today. This idea of like keeping high expectations, grade level content. It's so, I think, tempting to lower our standards, but we know that if we keep our standards high, they will rise to that occasion. And so I know in my group, I had this middle school and high school group, and there was a lot of opportunities for coaching questions around rigor. And I know we're going to share all of these coaching questions back with everybody as a resource. How do we in these virtual spaces continue to support our teacher candidates so that students are doing the majority of the thinking, that we're not doing the majority of the talking, but they're doing the majority of the thinking and the doing? And they're engaged. I know in my group, we talked a lot about what happens, how do we set our teacher candidates up to really ensure that all students are participating, but what happens when students aren't participating? And we talked a little bit about how it might look, it might not be in the middle of a lesson where a teacher candidate is able to get students to participate that aren't. It could be phone calls after to reach out to see how those students are doing. It could be different individual ways to check in and support students and help them and encourage them to participate. And that helps the teacher candidate develop empathy and an understanding of what's happening in that teacher candidate's world right now. And then this idea that just kind of sums it all up around how we're ensuring consistent high expectations for our students. So as we conclude our time today, we are going to ask you for feedback. And, you know, in last week's session, before we chat the feedback survey, we did talk a little bit about post-conferencing and how do you manage that post-conference with students? So you would have set up your observation. You did a great pre-conference, prepared them for those key areas. and you observe their lesson. And you know, we always recommend within 48 hours a post-conference, and it will likely happen virtually via a Zoom technology or another type of technology such as Zoom. But we also encourage you to leverage, if possible, teacher candidates being able to watch each other teach. So if they're able to share their videos with other teacher candidates as a way to give other teacher candidates feedback on their lesson, as well as, you know, you are, in that way as a teacher educator, you are implementing higher levels of thinking in your own class by having them provide peer feedback to one another. So there's so many things we can do now because we have these virtual tools and we have videos on how we can create a sense of rigor for our own teacher candidates learning around this. So we're so appreciative of you attending today. In just a moment, you will see in the chat a feedback survey, and we would love to give you just a minute or two to fill out that feedback survey. And we always, of course, use your feedback to continually improve our work with you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, and we're looking forward to bringing all of your coaching questions together, and all of the materials will be sent out to you within the next 24 hours. So thank you, everybody.